click.
I don't know shit, I don't know shit, I don't know click, boy. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Existential Dad. I'm your host, Mike Cannon. We are a dad show, as you know. We're here to discuss dad theory. We're not going through technique. We're not debating things. That's how you get in the weeds. That's how we get divisive. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in coming together, discussing kind of the deep inner feelings that we experience as parents. Isn't that queefy? But it's where I'm at in my life right now and exactly what I want to discuss. So if you're into hardcore comedy, there are plenty of other options on this YouTube channel. But if you're a parent looking for some validation, looking for a laugh, looking to maybe feel less bad about yourself by looking at somebody truly melting down, this is the place for you. Henry Hill, they're sending helicopters. Let's get into it. The first question that I posed to the social media followers, which again, that's what this show is. I throw out a question, existential in nature, of the parenting variety, and you guys, as my social media followers and eventual fans of this podcast, respond, give me a little bit of your personal insight, which has been so incredible, heartening, and just like affirming from a human to human level. I experience very little positivity on the internet. Of course, there are people that say good job, all that stuff, but that washes off my back like a duck. The stuff that really sticks are the insults and the things that really hit my insecurities that I believe about myself. But this experience, just even floating these questions to people and having you guys sincerely answer them, has been one of the more positive internet experiences of my entire life. So thank you guys for that. Next question. How do you regulate / recalibrate or even out from a stressful parenting experience? This is my not struggle, but this is kind of like my North Star. This is the thing that I have to go back to a lot because the way that I was raised was in fight or flight. So my initial impulse is to kind of freak out, and I feel my skeleton and I feel my emotions like literally they're about to burst out of my mouth like it's a break in a dam. It's almost involuntary. So the thing that I have had to do is notice the like millisecond lead up to a freak out, which, you know, I think is damn near impossible for most of the Irish population. But for me, I know the temperature, like how it starts in my body, and I can actually feel almost like the walls shaking a little bit. And in that moment, I have a really critical decision to make, which is look at my son, recognize that he loves me, recognize that I love him, recognize that he is a small human being that is, you know, learning on the fly and having to cope with this world every you know, moment of the day. And each thing is new. And even the things that he's gotten used to aren't things that he could possibly be really used to. You know, it's just in his new life, he's used to that. So for me, it's that moment. It's the moment of awareness where I have the opportunity to stop the behavior before it happens. But another thing, and I think I've mentioned this on a previous episode, a lot of this is going to be retreading because a lot of this is just reminding myself that I already know what to do, but to do it because things just fly out of your head. Empathy. I don't know if you guys have this, but I sometimes have a tough time maintaining empathy. Like sometimes the frustrations of my life erode it, and I'll start to react in a way that is, you know, slightly calloused or like how I used to react. And then I have to almost refresh empathy. And it's not by, you know, I'm not necessarily taking mushrooms every other week to try to burst my ego wide open, but something like that where it's kind of a come to moment with yourself where you're like, hey, I'm reacting in a way that I don't like. Maybe I'll pump the brakes a little bit and try to be a bit softer, be a bit more understanding. And again, what we've talked about before is like, how did I want to be parented? How did I need to be parented in those moments? So anytime that I have that impulse, that reaction to be like have stop, I also know that that's because I was not allowed to have those feelings as a child. So that's the kind of thing that I'm at least trying to keep in mind on the surface level because it's hard. It's an every moment of the day reminder.
I have a question before we jump into it is, since you had your son, have you noticed about yourself, or even has your wife noticed that you kind of are less, I don't want to say temperamental, but less likely to explode? Have you, because you have a son, have you kept kind of those moments in check a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like out in the world. I'm less explosive for sure. I mean, I've done a good job at that with with my wife because we've had to go through several versions of me to get to a version that is capable of having an adult relationship with a woman. That's through therapy and stuff like that. So I've tried my very best to not be that explosive, volatile person in general. And then having a kid is the ultimate test of that because they are basically showing a mirror to you of the things that you don't like, or at least were taught not to like about yourself. So it's a constant battle with me specifically and how I speak to myself of then regurgitating that to my son who is doing the things that remind myself that I hate myself.
All right, let's get to the first question. Mike O'Keefe says, make sure things are at a manageable level for the time being and take a breather and do something else. I've survived 16 years as a dad of twins, but they are both starting to hit summer drinking parties. So I might have to just fake my own death.
Yeah, and again, that's above my pay grade. I mean, all of this is above my pay grade. Again, this is a discussion show. There is no advice to be given. We're all just kind of having a conversation together, but I'm the only one allowed to talk. It's like classic. This is just kindergarten teaching the podcast, basically, where I'm like, thank you, children. Thank you. Thank you. Now I'm the adult and it's my turn. Which by the way, my son, speaking of that, like, kids going into a thing that you remember being intense. When I went into kindergarten, I talk about this? How I massaged the feet of my kindergarten teacher during story time, like consistently. She would have me do that. And it's a thing that I tried to talk about on stage as like a funny thing. And then when you tell you really get a gauge for like what your life experience is when you tell a room full of strangers a thing that you think is funny and that your family has convinced you that was funny and all that. And then you're like, the whole room is like, you were molested, bro. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a different way to frame it. And now that's, not to say that my son is going to massage the feet of his teachers. I'll keep a close eye. But, I'm just saying that he's heading into the grade where that was a thing for me. So it's like really starting up the clock of, man, how fucked up is this going to get?
Does that bring back, as he hits certain ages, does it actually bring back like repressed memories that you kind of
Yeah,
got about?
it really does. I mean, I don't know if I talked about it, but I've been talking about it on stage is when I'm auditing my childhood. I'm really going back and combing through some of my past behaviors in an attempt to empathize with my son. Like in an attempt to kind of see what's to come because it really didn't feel like my parents were connected to that at all. Like they had no real memory of their own childhood. Maybe they weren't even children. They were just beamed down as adults, but it felt like all of my behavior was so confusing to them and also just enraging that there's no way they could have made mistakes as children. Like that was my thought process. So now heading into like 5 years old, I took my parents' wicker trash basket from their room, put it in my closet, and pissed in it for 2 weeks because I wanted my own bathroom. I didn't know not to. We only had one bathroom between the five of us, so why not? Why not piss in this chemical porous wastebasket? And it ruined my closet, completely warped the floors and the carpet. It was in the middle of August, I think. Like, and my parents were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. Nobody's really informing me what to do. I really truly don't know." So just I got kicked off the bus when I was in first grade for the full school year. Could you imagine also like looking a 6-year-old in the eyes and being like, "What you've done today is uncomebackable"? I just fought. I got in a fight. Some kid said, "Your mama," and I beat the brakes off of him because that's how my parents taught me to deal with conflict. And then, of course, my mom came in to the school and was like, "What happened?" I was like, "He came after you. He said something about my mother, and I decided that was not acceptable." And she was like, "What did he say?" He said, "Your mama." And she looked so disgusted at me. I was like, "That's the last time I defend a woman. It's the last time."
So Brett Klein says, my son was diagnosed with leukemia, and I've been there for everything, but had some serious breakdowns over this past month. The main thing has been relying on my family and friends a lot for support, even if it's something smaller than cancer. I've realized that if you have family and friends, you never have to stick everything out by yourself.
Yeah, I mean that is Brett. I know I've worked with him actually in radio. I did prank calls for a radio station through Brett. So Brett, I love you, man, and you know obviously I sent you this, but sending all love, positive vibes, and all that stuff to your family. That's something I can't even imagine. But to stick with the question, I guess, because I could just cry if I really give this a lot of consideration. But to stick with the question, you're right. It is family, like that kind of thing. I have such a complicated relationship with my family, well documented, one might say, a little too well documented. I feel really bad about some of the stuff I've said in the past or how just openly transparent I was emotionally about some of the things. Like, you can't take that back. Do I think it was wrong or do I disagree with the feelings? No, but it's just stuff that, when you zoom back, you're like, "Oh, I wish I didn't necessarily document that glimpse of anger in my life." But, it is what it is. But family for me has been like has been redefined since I've had a son, since I've had a wife. My entire expectation and idea of what a nuclear family, or at least just people that are that close and supportive of you, has been completely changed. My family at home, I'm really tight with my sisters. My mom and I have a weird relationship, complicated. My dad and I have obviously a complicated relationship. My family is fractured in the sense of how we can all hang out together, although it's actually becoming more adult as time goes on. My son just had his 5th birthday party. Both my parents were there, which if you asked me 10 years ago, that would have been a completely like impossible thing to envision. But like it's true, even for small things, big things, whatever, like I feel I feel closest to whole or closest to understood when I'm talking to my older sister and she really can like affirm that what I'm thinking, where I'm from, where my feelings stem from, and all those things. There's like, hey, I get it. I get where it is. I get where you're at. She also has advice that other people couldn't possibly have for me because she knows my full Wolverine origin story. She saw the spider bite my hand, which I know is Spider-Man, not Wolverine, but you get the fucking metaphor. But that's, it helps. It really helps to have people that have been around for that long that you're anchored to, that can give you a support that you almost can communicate with without communicating. You don't need words. It's just kind of there. And just them being a solid resource for you to go to is just invaluable. And I don't think I would have, I mean, I'm assuming people that have followed me for a really long time, which based on the responses to these questions, people are like, dude, since Rabbit Hole, since Irish Goodbye, since this and that. I mean, so cool. But if you know me for that long and you heard what just came out of my face, that's probably extremely shocking.
Next is Uncle Big Beans.
Oh, Big Beans. Uncle Big Beans? I mean, that's got to be about his scrotum.
Quite a nickname. That hour or two I get after I put him in the bed, only time I get to breathe and be with my thoughts. But I usually spend it playing video games or watching YouTube, which feels unhealthy. In the summer, I like to make a fire in the backyard and stare into the abyss.
This is what I've learned, right? Is of course there are healthier ways to express yourself or to spend your time or to engage your own brain. But when it comes to decompressing and when it comes to actually mellowing your body down, I'm all for PEDs. Like I'm not, obviously I don't drink anymore, and that to me wasn't even tamping down my anxiety because it would ratchet it up. But if like a glass of wine or whatever works for you, if you're a person that can control yourself and that's something that like actually benefits and helps you out, by all means, man, anything that can get you to that place. And I know that sounds very like shortcutty and kind of, I'm not even giving it to I'm not giving advice. I'm just saying like that's kind of how I'm greenlighting myself because I can give myself shit for how I'm getting myself decompressed, which then completely nullifies the decompression. You understand? So I can be OCD about everything if I choose to, but you have to let go and let God about certain things. And that really, for me, all about relaxation because I could stress myself out of, a blowjob in Bali. I could literally be on a hammock with just like and just see dolphins diving in the distance with a perfect sunset behind it, and my wife not speaking but performing a glorious. And I'm just like, and I could think of something that takes me out of that moment and brings me to Newark, New Jersey, and I'm trying to catch the bus. So why do that? Just allow yourself the green lights to enjoy and decompress and feel stress free. So I get it, man. Video games, scrolling, doom scrolling, all that shit. It might not feel great. It might be one of those things that you're also trying to get away from, but that's a gradual process, as you know. So if you've found a path to relaxation, stay on that path. And then if you eventually feel like you can safely venture off with a goddamn machete and hack through a fucking jungle in a healthier way and find the same pool of water to cool off in nude, by all means do that. But for now, find whatever it takes to get you down. And for me, what I've been doing, because, last night, dude, right now legalization of edibles and stuff in New York is tedious, and there's some real dispensaries, there's some non. The real dispensaries, their edibles are much lower dosage, and the other ones are like high dose, but some of them aren't obviously regulated. This has a point. I took a 300 milligram edible last night where I took it because I didn't believe it. I saw it and I was like, I've taken that before and it's been more like 50. So I took it and I was like, oh, we'll see where we're at in an hour and then maybe I'll take another one. And within 20 minutes, I was like, oh no. Like it was just one of those, like, this is 300 minimum. If anything, the entire bag might have gotten into a little corner of this gummy and I'm now on 4 trillion milligrams. So that had the adverse effect that edibles typically have for me. It didn't calm me down. It threw me into a vortex of self-doubt. My wife is going to give birth any minute. So I'm like, what is happening if I have to snap to, which by the way, I can cut through drugs like the best of them. If anything, I literally rescued my brother-in-law from the general admission pit of Foo Fighters while I was on mushrooms and he passed out from exhaustion and I lifted him like fucking Forrest Gump did Bubba, and I walked him out of the Vietnam jungle. But I'm just so whatever. So what might help you eventually, what might help you at some level can turn on you at some level. So for me, edibles was huge. Decompress, take this edible, do this. It's kind of a routine sort of thing. And now I'm kind of backing off of that. So I might re-engage eventually. I might not even quit, but I might just tamp it down. Who knows? But right now, I've found lion's mane. That's a new thing that I've been doing, which is classic. I'm just being influenced by China and TikTok, but it's this drink that I got, organic, not a drug at all, totally normal, whatever, euphoric kind of zen, almost, tranquil Bill and Ted type feeling. And that to me has been the thing that I've been taking to chill lately. And so, always open to new options. Whatever gets you there, gets you there. Don't feel bad for feeling good, man.
Moving on to Mike Feeney. And Mike says, remind myself he's a kid and that he doesn't know any better and he loves me and I'm his entire world.
I mean, that's kind of what I was saying in the beginning, where that's a huge thing. It's also like we're I find myself sometimes, and this is speaking about myself, so I don't want to put this on anybody else, but I find myself because my son shows such like impressive development at times that I forget how old he is. And I forget that like 5 isn't old and that's not a grown up and that's not even close to being a full human being with fully developed cognitive and reasoning abilities. And I grade him sometimes through the filter of him knowing everything and for him being a fully developed human being. And that's wrong. It's unfair. And that's actually kind of abusive. If you look at a child and you're like, why aren't you making adult decisions? And you're getting frustrated because of that, you're being abusive. And I'm talking to myself because, like, my wife had to point that out where I got frustrated one day about something. And I kind of was like, she saw me ramp up to almost get to I'm being a little hard on somebody thing. And she just stopped me and she's like, hey, man, like, I think we often forget this. Like, he's still a little baby boy. Obviously 5 years old isn't an infant, so I'm not saying baby boy as if coddle, suck on my hairy nipple. I'm saying baby boy as in like, give some grace, man. And again, I'm talking to myself. Give grace. Allow the mistake to happen. Allow the mistake to happen and not give such a Coach Taylor rigid inspirational speech right after. Because that's again something that I get really caught in the weeds with, where like my father was so not communicative with me that I'm almost overly communicative. So there's times where I would be better suited to let things breathe and to let my son actually fail himself and find the correct route himself. And I have to actively stop myself from being like, but because that's control shit. It's my own shit. It has nothing to do with him. It's all internal stuff that, based on my upbringing, based on whatever I've gone through in my life, that's that's where I'm coming from. So I'm trying my best to, not install that into him based on my own bullshit internally.
So MC says, I put myself on a timeout, turn on music that will give me the serotonin boost, go for a walk, excuse myself for a cry. Sometimes it's deep breaths. Sometimes it's sitting in my car before walking into the house and saying every curse word ever. A lot of reminding myself that whatever is going on with my kid, it's about them. It's not a personal attack on me. Also, a fuck ton of edibles because children are assholes and emotional terrorists.
See, that's like I it's so funny, man, because I think I used to take offense to, like, something like that, and I think I was fighting over my own natural impulse to, like, have that brief, like, "Fuck you, kid," but then realize that I'm being the asshole, but it's okay to say those things. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was almost fighting that, being like, "You don't have to, like, say that about your kid. You don't have to say they're an asshole. What if I'm the asshole?" And it's like, sure, but it's also helpful to make that joke in the moment to call them an asshole because then that actually, like, ejects the feeling from you. It also puts it right in front of your face. So you calling your kid an asshole is actually a good reminder that they're not, and you are indeed the actual asshole. Because there's nothing like saying something out loud to be reminded of its idiocy. So that's just a little aside for me. Just if you feel like, oh, people are sometimes harsh or whatever, I don't know. I get super queefy about that. But MC answers a ton of these questions, and she is a really really smart person. I love that I put myself on timeout, and obviously this is up to your own individual situation and circumstance. Whether you have a partner that can help, whether you have an older kid that can help, all those things. But putting yourself on a timeout, creating space, allowing yourself the freedom to feel the feelings and, all that shit, I think it's important. I also tell my kid to do that. I'm like, "Hey man, you don't have to stop feeling." That's actually counterintuitive. If you're losing your mind, I watch it all the time of people being like, "Stop. Stop crying" to your kids, and that's such a natural impulse because one, you don't want them to be upset. So that actually comes from a good place. Two, it might be a public place. So you're trying to shut down whatever is going on there. And then, I don't know. Like three, it's making yourself feel very anxious. So you just want everything, you just want a clean slate to be able to stop and discuss from. But it's it's counterintuitive. It doesn't help. Saying stop, one, makes everybody feel awful for feeling anything. That's probably why I feel guilty for having a single shred of emotion throughout my day. And it's, and two, it almost always escalates. It's literally like a cop having their hand on the gun when they're just like, and they're like, hey, 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 and you're like, like you're not de-escalating. It's like your hands on the gun. Everybody's freaking out. Why would I de-escalate if it looks like we're gonna have a shootout? So that's like I'm trying my best to create those like that space and create like pregnant pauses are good, man. I actually find that to be good. If I'm just like, all right, let's take a minute, and me and my son are sitting there, and the beats and the silence, and if one of us speaks, it's fine. But like that's better than reaching for answers right away and getting to an angrier place. Because I found that when I'm scrambling to try to fix things right away, it almost always escalates.
Well, isn't like the rule of thumb too? Like, I mean, I don't have a kid, but it's kind of the same thing with animals too. Like whatever emotion you kind of put out there,
Yeah.
they're going to absorb it and reflect that also.
Yeah, well, I think the big thing with kids, and this goes to, oh, they're little kids and they don't process on an adult level, is that I can explain anything that I want to my son, anything and everything, and tell him and give him the tools and information and all that stuff. It means absolutely dick all if my behavior is to the contrary. So I better be providing that example alongside the words and the lesson, or else it completely means nothing and he's only following what I do. Because that's what they do. He's looking at me all day and he's seeing my actions and I watch him mimic. So I have tangible I mean, I have like a dude that's whose entire life depends on me being reasonable. Sorry. I'm sorry, man. That's a tough card to pull, but you know what? I think other people have pulled worse ones somehow, some way.
We'll do Jessica. She says, I'm an autism mom. I do this very often and just breathe. Try not to take it to another level because they, your kids, are watching and your reaction is their reaction.
Yeah, I mean the exact same thing, and I mean that's probably even ramped up more because there's a communication barrier. It's tougher to have that verbal communication. Dude, the gates of hell are about to open upon us. So this is potentially our last outdoor episode of the season. But either way, this has been fun, and hopefully we can create an existential environment inside. But that is it. You just create the example. Words mean something, actions mean everything.